3 simple steps to improve your pronunciation or accent with a real example that Brazilians struggle with. So maybe you struggle with some of these: men versus man, bed versus bad, sick versus seek, cold versus code, look versus luke, or consonant sounds like th and three, through, though, this, teeth, Thursday, are, the rural juror's error in the sorority's mirror. That's a hard sentence, admittedly. You'll never need to say that actual sentence in real life, but you get my point. Dark L, like world, people, tall, and much more. Final M or N, like the difference between sim, sin, and sing. Or maybe adding extra vowel sounds by accident, like Facebook or YouTube or something like that, Hochidogi, where a native speaker from the US wouldn't probably add those vowel sounds in English, but if you're Brazilian, you might add them without even realizing it. And there might be some places that you're still doing that without even being aware of it. And much, much more. These are just some of the things that a lot of my Brazilian clients struggle with. So, and it may be hard for you to hear the difference in these things, and that's okay, that's normal. Just like when a gringo is learning Portuguese, like when I was learning Portuguese and I couldn't hear the difference between bom and pau. And maybe even now I'm not saying it perfectly, but hey, it's a work in progress. I'm getting closer. Or meu and mel, or avô and avó. Anything like this. At first, it's normal to not be able to hear the difference, and especially to not be able to say it. But so maybe that's where you're at right now with some of these sounds in English, and that's okay. Or maybe you're already a little bit more advanced and you can actually hear the difference and say the difference. Maybe you're not fully confident in it. Or maybe you can do it well when you focus on it, but then as soon as you get distracted or stressed or you're not paying attention, it kind of slips and you go back to old habits. So as soon as you get up and you're talking in a meeting at your company, or there's an audience, or you're in a conversation, or you're in a hurry, it comes out in a very Brazilian way. Not that that's bad, right? You don't have to sound like an American from the US, but if you want to, I'm showing you this is how I think about the process to change these habits, to change these patterns. So no matter where you're at on this journey, you're in the right place. Whether you think your English is great or terrible, you're in the right place. So let's keep going. Even if you're an advanced English speaker, you probably do still struggle with some of these fundamentals, these things that seem basic, even in tiny words that seem like they should be simple. And I know that can be frustrating, but it's good for us to look at this. So even simple words like in, on, the, of, all, and lots more. A lot of my Brazilian clients, again, even advanced English speakers who've been speaking English for over a decade, who are super good, effective communicators, sometimes still get frustrated when they notice that they say the word like in all the time. Like I was in Italy, like their vowels are coming out in kind of a more Brazilian way, or the N at the end of the word in sounds a little more like instead of in with like the tip of the tongue, na. There's all these differences that happen all over the place, even in these tiny little words that you think you already know. And even the complicated words are built from these basic building blocks. So it really is this idea of arroz com feijão bem feito. Or you may have heard this Bruce Lee quote, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. And that's basically what I would say that we need to do here with accent and pronunciation, because you have some strong habits from your native language, from your native accent, which, if you're like most of my clients, of course, is Brazilian Portuguese, some version of that. And your brain processes sounds in specific ways that work really well in Portuguese. But when you switch to a new environment, a new language or accent, you have to kind of rewire your brain. And your brain isn't incentivized to do this because you can survive. You can actually do well and be pretty, you can do pretty well while still sounding Brazilian, or while sort of mispronouncing some words, occasionally having to repeat yourself. Like, you can still survive doing that. You might not be totally happy about it, but as far as your brain is concerned, it's probably not that big of a deal. Like, is it really worth the effort for your brain to rewire some of these fundamental ways that it processes sounds? Well, I would say that if you think that it is, if you want to, there's an opportunity here. And that's what this work is about, is diving deeper and kind of poking at your brain, almost forcing your brain to wake up and say, hey, these differences are important to me. I don't want to just keep repeating my old habits. I don't want to not be able to hear these differences in sounds. I want to train myself to start noticing new differences, very tiny, subtle details that most people don't care about. I'm choosing to care about them, and I'm telling my brain, wake up, let's figure this out. And we do that by focusing on one kick 10,000 times, basically. Arroz com feijão bem feito. It's by doing these things that seem like they should be simple or stupidly easy, and maybe you even beat yourself up because it seems like it should be so easy and you're still struggling with these basics, but that's really the name of the game. Like, it's being a humble beginner over and over, even if you're advanced, and going back to basics and building from there. So avoiding the problem won't magically fix it. You might, in fact, be able to think of some Brazilians that you know who've lived in the US for, decades, and yet they've hit a plateau. They've gotten kind of stuck or frozen, even if they want to keep improving with their English or their accent or pronunciation or communication skills. They've kind of gotten stuck. So more time alone probably is not a magic solution. And that can be scary, of course, because life is short. And I don't mean to dive too much into that pain or whatever. And again, this is optional. You don't have to do this work, truly. I would argue you can be happy and successful with a thick foreign accent, and you can communicate pretty well, like accent and pronunciation. There's all these nuances, right? So hopefully we're on the same page. You don't probably really have to do this. But if you want to, if you're like me and you want to, if you think it would help you feel more confident, if you, just like trying to sound more like an American or speak more clearly or naturally or whatever it is, whatever your reasons are, you can have different reasons than the next person, and they may not understand you, and that's okay. But if you want to look at the technical process for what I suggest, if you want to make this sort of transition, create new habits, and speak closer to how a lot of people in the US speak, then let's dive in. I'll show you how I think about this and what I do with my clients and myself. So here's the method. It's 3 simple steps, and we'll even go through an example together. So first of all, let's keep it simple. High-level description. Step 1, learn to hear and say the sound or the sounds in isolation or simpler context. So keep it simple. Just, can you hear it? Can you say it by itself? Step 2, now take those sounds and put them in harder contexts. So this might mean actual bigger words or phrases or whatever it is. Make it harder. And step 3, improvise phrases with the sounds. So now instead of just reading a text that's prepared, this is you actually just speaking out loud and randomly saying stuff, anything you want. And as you're doing that, making sure that you're using these sounds or these words or whatever it is that you're practicing, you put them into your improvised speech, because this gets you closer to what you actually want to do in the end, which is you don't want to just be good at pronunciation drills for no reason. The reason we're doing all of this is so that when you're actually speaking and improvising in everyday conversation, professionally or personally or wherever, even with stress, even with distractions, you want these sounds to become kind of habits, right? You want them to come out of you naturally without even thinking about it. And the only way we can get there, I would argue, is by training, by building these habits over time. So this step 3 here is sort of bridging from just isolated pronunciation drills to actually putting it into improvised speech and starting to get closer to the final context we're aiming for, which is real life, improvised speech about any topic with any number of distractions. So basically, that's the high level. Step 1, 2, 3, that's it. So now let's walk through one example together. This will give you a bit of a feel for what I actually help people with, how this looks like. And then you could, of course, choose to continue applying this method on your own, and I think it'll be helpful for you. Or if you want more help, you can hire me, and I can mentor you and guide you on this journey and applying this to each specific example that you struggle with, and, throughout a variety of examples, sort of across the dictionary of the language. For each of these sounds, it's not just learning the sound, it's then applying it to all of the places where this sound actually shows up in your everyday speech. You might be able to do in versus ing. You might figure that out in one spot, but then as soon as you say the word live or leave, you might be kind of still doing the old habit in that context. So it is definitely a journey. I think you're capable of doing it on your own if you're committed. But yeah, it's up to you. All right, so I'm here to help. Notice that this method can be applied to many different examples, not just this one example. But let's go ahead and look at one specific example. So I chose pen versus pan. This is the same pattern or distinction, by the way, that shows up in men versus man, ten versus tan, send versus sand, bend versus band, lend versus land, and much, much more. And you'll see the spelling does happen to be kind of consistent with the examples I picked here, at least. It's actually very consistent. I'm trying to think if there's cases where it's not consistent. Obviously, as you know, English spelling and pronunciation can get crazy. It's not always consistent. But I think that for this example, it's more consistent. So that's nice, but it's not always going to be that way. So now let's apply the 3-step method to this example of pen versus pen. So step 1 again is keep it simple. Can you hear it and say it? This difference in sounds. Are you able to hear the difference or no? And then are you able to say the difference in sounds, each sound, or no? That's simple. Not in like a big crazy word or phrase. Just keep it simple. In just the word like pen and just the word pan, comparing them back and forth, if someone quizzed you and said, which word am I saying? Pen. And then you have to guess which one was it, and then pan, and you have to guess, can you get it right, or are you just guessing and it's random and you're hoping, you know? So it's training this skill of being able to tell the difference, both for your listening and for your speaking. So now to do this is where stuff gets crazy, and some of you may have never done something quite like this before, because we really want to go beyond letters and look at the realities of the sounds, because the letters can betray us. They can make us think that things are simpler than they are. But the realities of the sounds is where stuff gets interesting. If you imagine you're a baby and you've never even, like you don't know how to read, you're just listening to sound patterns and your brain is filtering a crazy amount of detail in these sounds, and you're learning what differences in the, you know, what details to ignore in the sounds and what details to pay attention to. So your Brazilian brain learned to ignore and pay attention to certain details and put sounds in categories, and that helps you in Portuguese. But now when you switch to English, your brain has these blind spots. It's putting sounds into categories that aren't helpful in English, and you're missing things. Just like a gringo might think that pão and pau are the same. They just say pau for everything because their brain is ignoring that difference in sounds. To you as a native speaker, it's obvious, but to a gringo learning Portuguese, it's confusing because both of those sounds get put into the same sound bucket. So it's learning to kind of retrain your brain to hear new differences in sounds. So in this process, keep an open, curious mind. Try to be almost like a baby, because this may feel very strange if you haven't done it before, like you're escaping the matrix or a fish leaving the water, or however you want to think about it. It can be a kind of a weird sensation. So before we go to step 2, let me kind of exit this presentation and show you some ways we might actually look at this. And you can do this on your own. This is stuff I do with clients as well. So one thing we could do would be actually, let me start on Youglish, because that's more accessible for you if you're doing this on your own. But there's stuff I do with clients too, and I'll show you that in a sec. So what you could do is you could go to Youglish and search by accent for US accent. You can put in the word pen, and then here, what does it sound like?
Pastors, journalists, European pen pals.
So you could hear how he said that. You can hear more examples. You could slow it down if you want.
So you're given a pen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to grab a notebook, pen, pencil, paper.
And then you could go do the same thing, but now with the word pan, and listen to examples there.
Dump everything into a saucepan, bring it to a boil.
The camera is going to pan over.
Now, of course, when these sounds are mixed in with, you know, a full phrase, it can be hard for your brain to actually compare these sounds side by side, right? Because there's all these other sounds that are distracting you. So that's where we get to, whether you do this by yourself or with my help, we really want to try to get these sounds side by side without all this other distracting information. So we can give your brain a chance to actually start noticing these differences. Because if your brain's distracted by the full rest of the phrase, it's really hard for your brain to remember what you heard in one phrase and then keep that in your memory and compare it to a subtle difference you're not used to noticing in a different phrase, 5 seconds later. It's kind of like if you close your eyes, you can see an image of something for a short second. You can kind of still remember what things look like, but then the image fades from your mind. I like to think that kind of the same thing happens with sounds. So if we want to give your brain a chance to compare these sounds side by side, we need to shorten the time between the two different things we're comparing. Not just listen to more, random hours of content. We need to go deep, not wide. We need to get rid of distractions and sort of zoom in on the difference. So we could edit these sounds using software. We could slow down the videos. There's various ways we could do it. But I'm just going to kind of skip ahead in the interest of time and show you what I would do with a client generally is one way or the other, I'm going to get these sounds into Audacity. And when it's in my accent, a so-called general American accent of some sort, or, if you want to sound kind of like I do, then I can just record my voice and we can use me as an accent model. So here I recorded myself saying pen and pan, pen, pan. And what we could do is sort of zoom in to almost force your brain to start noticing tiny differences. So again, this is totally beyond letters. Forget letters. These words could be written with any symbols you want. That doesn't really matter. What matters here is what are the actual sounds you're hearing? So let's pay close attention. So if I just kind of select the first initial part, the P sound, some of the air coming out with the P, and then just the beginning of whatever vowels are happening, let's hear what that sounds like in this word. Pet, pet, pet. And here's the other one. Pant, pant, pant. So already you might be noticing a difference. If you're not, that's okay. It just will take more training. But if you're like many people, you're probably noticing a tiny difference right now. Pet, pet, pant, pant, pet, pet, pant, pant. And that's the entrance point. If you don't have it quite yet, don't worry. We could work on it more together. It's normal to have difficulty, but if you are noticing it, then great. You're already getting access to this entrance point of what is the difference between these words. Pet, pet, pant, pant, pet, pet, pant, pant. And you could even imitate this out loud. Pet, 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 pet. You might notice it's kind of like That's the key difference that I'm noticing, at least. And you can, of course, you can be critical, skeptical. You can think about this and come to your own conclusions. But what I'm hearing in this audio is kind of a difference. The P sounds pretty similar, and then the vowel after it, I hear a slight difference. One is like and one is like like more open, more closed, kind of. Now let's go after that. Let's look at kind of the ending of the sounds beyond, that part we just heard of. And. And we could even zoom in a little more on just the end of it. And. Again, you're probably hearing some differences. If not, that's okay, but stay curious, keep an open mind, and try to notice differences. Pen, pen, pan, pan. So what we can do is kind of deconstruct these sounds and these words, arroz com feijão, bem feito, zoom in on these little differences that your brain's not used to noticing. Don't just hope you'll magically figure it out. Like, let's force your brain to wake up and get you to start noticing and imitating these sounds. So, pan, 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 something like that, right? You can imitate that with me here if you want. Pan, pan, something like that. Pan, 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 pan. Again, you can come to your own conclusions, but there's definitely a difference here. Multiple differences. Pen, pen. All right, so I think you get the idea. So that's probably enough on this for now. I just want to open your mind to what's possible here, because this is a process that you can apply to anything, really any language, any accent. Going beyond the letters, going beyond your assumptions, what people teach you in intellectual ways. No, just go actually dive into the real audio with an open mind and hear what are the real differences. You can be your own independent detective. And I'm here to help you increase your independence and your skill if you would like. Because this is what I've been doing for years, almost decades at this point, 15 years, in multiple languages and accents. And although the details change from one language or accent to the next, it's all the exact same process. This is what I do all the time. Or at least some version of it, right? All right, so let's go back to this slideshow. So that was step one. Learn to hear and say the sounds in isolation or simpler contexts. And I'm not, you may feel like you've made some progress here, and that would be great if you have. If you feel like you're behind, that's okay too. You're in the right spot wherever you're at. But let's keep going to step two, just so you can get a feel for kind of how this process goes. So step two is put the sounds in harder contexts. So basically that means let's do some practice sentences. So now if I leave the presentation again, let me pull up this again. This stuff's simple, super simple. Even when I work with clients, it'll just be like a notepad document or sending an audio on WhatsApp. It doesn't have to be complicated. So we could just look at some words that involve this difference, like pen versus pan, men versus man, ten versus tan. And then you or I can just, write some simple sentences, or we might be able to find some online, or I might have some already written. You might only need one sentence. Again, this can be super simple, deep, not wide. So something like this: man, those men got a tan at 10. Imagine that we choose this sentence is how you're going to train it, and then I send you a WhatsApp audio, a simple 5-second or 10-second audio. I say this once fast and once slow, and then you just, throughout the week, you just listen to this and practice it and start building skill with these sounds. Man, men, tan, 10. And not just in isolation, but in the phrase, man, those men got a tan at 10. And you just keep practicing, arroz com feijão bem feito, over and over and over. And that's basically step two. Again, this stuff's simple. It's not easy necessarily. It doesn't mean it happens instantly. It takes time, it takes practice, but when you're focusing your efforts in a way that actually works, then you're actually getting results. You can feel the changes happening. It's not just, a waste of time and hoping that things will get better years or decades from now. It's no, you're actually doing work. You're like breaking through this metaphorical accent wall with a very focused like tool. You're focusing on the area specifically. You're not just hoping. You're like, let's dive in to this exact sound I'm struggling with. Let's not avoid it. Let's dive in and make progress now. All right, going back to the slideshow. So that's step 2, just very simple practice sentences. And step 3 is now just improvise phrases with the sounds. So again, I'll leave the slideshow. This is surprisingly simple. There can be details we need to troubleshoot, of course, and that's where you may want some help. But the basic idea is very simple. So now instead of just this pre-written sentence, what we would do is, imagine maybe this list of words at the top, and I would just have you start making up sentences, random, anything. It can make sense. It can be nonsense. It doesn't really matter. Just start talking, anything, improvising, and add these words in as you do it and try to get the pronunciation right as you're doing it. So like, oh, I was cooking with this pan and then someone needed a pen. I was like, oh, did you mean pan or pen? And it was this man, and he was actually 10 years old. He wasn't a man. And he was very tan, and then he was like, oh yeah, a pen. I need to write. I don't need to cook right now with a pan. Like, again, so basically this is like, it can be super simple. And I do this in Portuguese. I'll be walking around outside, working on the difference between ele and ela, like the difference in the vowel, because I used to say, instead of ele, I would say eli. And that was my habit. I didn't know that ela and ele had a different sound at the beginning. So I'm training that. I'll be walking around. I'll be like, ela e ele. Ela tá lá com ele. Ele tá no carro com ela. Like, again, just random stuff. You can make like funny examples if you want to make it enjoyable for yourself, but it can also be enjoyable just arroz com feijão, bem feito. Just work on these examples. Get the flow. Get curious about sounds. And you can make real change in your habits over time. All right, let's go back to the slideshow. So that's step 3, and that's it. Like, it's really that simple. Again, it doesn't happen immediately, but if you're willing to do this kind of work, if you're willing to focus your effort in a way that actually makes sense and makes progress, you'll actually feel real progress happening. Obviously, you may want more help with this. There is troubleshooting involved. There are details that I'm not covering here. I'm keeping this very simple in this presentation. But this really is how I think about working with clients and with my own personal accent training. It really is that simple. Now you have 2 options. You can certainly take what I've shown you and implement this on your own. You can apply this simple 3-step method to anything that you're struggling with. Or you can hire someone skilled, like me, who's actually done this for real, over and over and over and over and over 15 years by myself with clients in multiple languages, multiple accents. I'm someone who I don't just study theory or read books about this. I've done that too, but I'm not just like an intellectual thinking about phonetics and symbols. Like, no, I live this. And you don't have to know all the fancy academic stuff and the symbols. Like, a lot of this is kind of like riding a bike. You just try to do it over and over. You try to say the sound over and over. And if you're struggling, then I can help you using the theory that I know to help troubleshoot without you needing to learn all that phonetic theory and symbols. Like, I could just tell you, oh, try this. Like, or draw an image of your tongue in your mouth and be like, oh, you're probably doing this. Let's try this. Let's try this exercise. If you use this Portuguese word, maybe it'll help you access this sound in English. Like, we can brainstorm together and I can help you figure out how to go from where you are now to where you want to be. And to speak in Portuguese, why not? Eu sou falante nativo de inglês dos Estados Unidos, né? E falo português bem, aprendi sem aulas, até agora, pelo menos ainda sem visitar o Brasil. Espero visitar em breve. Estou realmente tentando falar igual brasileiro. Eu sei que ainda não falo igual brasileiro, mas estou chegando cada dia mais perto. E uma meta desnecessária, mas eu amo. É isso que eu estou realmente tentando fazer. Então, se você quiser tentar fazer algo parecido com o seu inglês, seja tentar falar igual nativo, ou só aperfeiçoar um pouco mais, se sentir um pouco mais confiante, falar um pouco mais natural, sei lá. É isso. So, yeah, and I'll help guide you through your journey. I'll save you time and frustration. I can give you clarity, feedback about specific sounds, like record you. We can listen to the recording of you speaking together, compare it to how I would say it. Like, you don't have to just trust me blindly. Like, we'll actually listen to how you said it together with an open mind, without, extra judgment and criticism. I'll help you be more kind of caring about yourself and not just beating yourself up. And we'll work through these sounds together in a in a very, evidence-based way, not just pretending and not seeing progress, but like recording yourself, comparing it versus how a native sounds, hearing the differences, recording yourself again and noticing, oh, I'm getting closer, or there's still something different. It's real concrete stuff. And I'll help show you where to focus your efforts next to break through the next layer of your accent wall. So, of course, even if we work together, most of the work is still up to you. I can't move your mouth for you. I can't listen through your ears. Most of your results will come from what you do, even if we work together. But I can definitely help simplify things for you. I can give you feedback. I'm starting to repeat myself here. That's okay. This presentation's imperfect. And you don't have to be perfect with your accent training either, right? Let's go. Let's keep it simple. Anyways, I can build customized training phrases and audios, like I mentioned, the WhatsApp stuff. Literally, it's that simple with a lot of my clients. It's not like, oh, you need to go through all these millions of exercises. No, it's like during this next week, here's a 10-second WhatsApp audio in between, like taking care of your baby or whatever it is that you're doing in your life that is busy. Just add in as much training as you can. Try to get some hours, some flight hours, get in, practice in this specific focused way on this one phrase, this one thing we're targeting, and you'll notice some results. The more you can do, the better, of course, but we can keep it simple. So I don't have a big fancy pitch with all the prices and details and urgency and all the marketing stuff in this presentation. I wanted this presentation to be mainly about the content. So let's keep this simple for today. Basically, if you want more help, just send me a message on Instagram at Simple American Accent. Let me know that you watched this presentation and that you're interested in possibly working together. And that's it. Hope to talk to you soon. And if not, either way, I'm rooting for you. Tô torcendo pra você. If you want my help, I'd love to help you on your journey. Talk to you later.